Hello, welcome to the video. Today we will be diving deep into early stoneworks and the history of Uldarash, mainly focusing on the Second Empire and its civil war. Big thanks to these people, they helped me a lot with this video. Please watch some of my other videos, and I plan to make more of these nation history videos in the future, so make sure to join my Discord and stay updated. Please like and subscribe, and let's get into this video. Uldarash forces were being pounded back to Sanctuary, the safe place of haven. The Battle of Sanctuary started with the declaration of the formation of the Sewer Mafia, who claimed much of North Haven at the time, all territory of the First Empire of Uldarash. After proclaiming the Empire of the Sewer Mafia, the warriors of the Sewer Mafia launched an attack on the city of Sanctuary. However, in the middle of the battle, the Imperial Archonate of Viadoxa launched an attack on Sanctuary, and the immediate subsequent Battle of Hopamitis. The Uldarashi forces quickly retreated to the capital of Hopamitis. The dwindling forces of Uldarash were quickly routed, and individual Uldarash and Aurorians were chased around the city by hordes of the iron armor-equipped Viadoxans, led by their netherite Chad leaders. Haven erupted into chaos, with many different nations being formed after the First Empire. Many nations declared independence, and the fate of the continent left unsure.
There are, of course, reasons to be worried about it, and even to be scared. Various uncouth activities that they'd accuse me of, or they give me back my crown. To which the response was initially, no, haha. Yeah, there just was no way to do it. It was an illegal paramilitary coup. It's plain and simple.
All of this happens on the Stoneworks Minecraft server, play.stoneworks.gg. A handful of states within the continent Uldarash was in, Haven, called for an emergency meeting inside Aurora's capital, Fornost. There they declared the formation of the true Empire of Uldarash, that soon after came to be known as the Second Empire of Uldarash. During the summit, all the nations of Haven, with the exception of Trafalgar and the Viadoxan client state of Arona, had joined together in the new Second Empire, naming the King of Aurora, Aurelian, the Regent Emperor. It was founded on March 5th, 2021. The Second Uldarash Empire varied drastically, and each state had a unique culture, but most people could unite under the sense of being Uldarashi. The Second Empire was regarded as one of Varathnir's most powerful and stable states, given its large population, well-equipped military, and relatively large economy. Not long after the Second Uldarash Empire was formed, the crazed goddess Entropy launched raids within Fornost, probably because they made friends with some weird people. Shortly after the defeat of Entropy, Tequila Knight steps down from his position as emperor. Shortly after, the High Council came together for a meeting. During the meeting, 4 candidates were recommended or volunteered themselves for the running. These being Polystilin of the Shevrik Republic, Nav of Boldarov, and Al-Sarida Volokrad. The election resulted in a 66% victory of Katarina, becoming the first empress in the history of Uldarash. Everything seemed great for the Second Empire of Uldarash. They were slowly expanding, taking back the First Empire's lost land. And with their enemies on the decline, they seemed to be the only superpower inside Rathnir. And it was time to show it. Around mid-July, the King of Falnir, Cedar Knight, of the Spirit Knight family, uncovered a plot to overthrow him from the throne of Falnir. Deciding that fighting to keep his position on the throne was not worth fighting for, Cedar Knight signed away his powers and fled the nation to avoid violence against him. Due to this sudden development and instability in Falnir, the Empire of Uldarash declared war on Falnir to annex the nation. During the war, Uldarashi troops breached the walls of Journey's End with explosives and pushed the Falnirian troops out of the city before the dust of the blast even settled. At the end of the battle, Uldarash suffered 0 casualties, while Falnir had suffered 60. 1 fighter killed for each minute of the battle, inspiring its name, the Minuteman War. This war wasn't just to secure stability, well sure it was definitely a focus, but this war served a greater purpose. It was to show the world the new Uldarash wasn't to be messed with, and showed its dominance over the battlefield. Increasing tensions between the southern nations of Rathnir and the Third Bardonian Empire led to the Uldarash joining the Third Rathnir coalition, alongside a large number of other states. The Uldarashi army brought 5 corps to fight in the Third Coalition War, 4 Aurorian and 1 Boldoravian. Though this was not the largest contingent of the war, it was by far the most effective fighting force on Rathnir, with the world's largest contingent of well-trained, well-equipped, and well-led troops. The Third Coalition War proved to be a decisive victory for the coalition forces, ushering in a golden age for the Second Empire, as no nations in Rathnir could help to challenge their military might. And after smacking around the kingdom of Falnir for a second time, everything seemed to be peaceful. With their domination across Rathnir, Uldarash and Olive Haven reached relative peace, not fighting in any wars for the next couple of months, becoming known as the safest place in all of Stoneworks. Until it wasn't. You see, the Second Empire was a much more federal and centralized model than the old one. One monarch was hereditary and would always be the king of Aurora, while the other one was elected by the states of the empire. See the problem yet? During the relative peace in Uldarash, the long-standing Emperor Canine stepped down from the Aurorian crown, granting the heir Sevens to become the new emperor, along with Quasar. The empire was moving along just fine for a while, as long as Sevens and Quasar wasn't in the same room, so they couldn't start talking about the Constitution. Sevens represented the conservatives, while Quasar represented the reformists. Sevens wanted to maintain an imperial authority stance and the federal system, while Quasar wanted increasing centralization and democracy in the empire, such as national imperial elections. Quasar put significant effort into pushing through an imperial constitution that would have created national elections and elected bodies for representation, and reducing the power of the emperors. Of course, Sevens did not like this and attempted to remove and silence Quasar from power. I mean, sure, it violated every constitution and every governing agreement made to form the empire, but it was in the name to save the empire. You following? Quasar did not go quietly, and several states of the empire such as Elfhelm and Montroig declared her removal illegitimate, which sparked the loyalist movement, which remained loyal to the true empress in their eyes. They further argued that Sevens had violated the constitution and therefore forfeited their position as emperor. The loyalists separated from the imperial government, forming Loyalist Uldarash, starting the Civil War after Sevens declared war. The next couple months for Uldarash were sparked with war, bloodshed, and not so fun times. With states like Nolaria seceding from the empire, the local continent war quickly turned into a who can back which side the most. The Elderman Entente alongside the Bardonian Empire, along with others, backed the Loyalists. From an outside point of view, the Civil War seemed to be a slow-moving theme, but with tons of bloodshed and profit to be made. But behind the curtains, the Aurorians began to centralize their power. The opening battle of the Uldarashi Civil War took place on the island of Canine. Though each side brought an equal number of troops, the fight ended in a massive defeat for the Loyalists, with 42 Loyalist deaths to merely 4 Imperial deaths, which some believed was a sign for what was to come for later in the war. Despite this, morale remained high within the Loyalist states, with many citing how the Battle of Canine did not actually count towards anything in the war, and was merely for fun. Additionally, it is of note that this battle served as a testing ground for a new war system of the server, which would be altered several more times over the course of the conflict, as the admins tried to work out what functioned the best. The Battle of Terrigia was the first official battle of the Civil War, and ended in a similar manner as the Battle of Canine. Terrigia proved to be the Loyalists' worst defeat, suffering around 100 deaths for 0 enemies killed. Much of the defeat was credited towards poor communications from the Loyalist leadership, which would be shown time and time after again to be a major issue within the secessionist state's leadership, one they would never learn from. The battle only served to increase the morale of Loyalist soldiers, bearing a few deserters, and the Loyalists now wanted to get back at the Imperials for attacking the capital city of Montroig, the de facto capital city of Loyalist Uldarash. The Battle of Northport occurred at the same time as the Battle of Tarajoa, and took place on a much smaller scale. A small detachment of troops from Elfhelm clashed with Aurorian soldiers on the outskirts of the city, killing one armed citizen in exchange for the loss of their entire force. The armed civilian was the only Uldarashi death of the day, who quickly became known as in Aurorian propaganda and folklore as the Iron Warrior, a selfless hero who brought enough time for the Aurorians to redeploy to Northport and repel the attackers. Although a memorial has been constructed in the honor of the Iron Warrior outside the town. Behind the scenes, Uldarashi troops were constantly skirmishing with the Loyalist side and the rebels. Citizens were not spared either, and factory workers creating armor sets for each side's war production was targeted as they walked home at night. Although the last 3 battles ended in massive defeats for the Loyalists, their confidence, at least in their command, remained. They were so confident, in fact, that their next plan was a ground offensive on both Hapamatis, the de jure capital city of the Second Empire of Uldarash. The Loyalists also targeted Kool-Aid City, a relative small border town in Chevriki. Large numbers of elite fighters, including the first troops from the Eldaham Entente, was assembled, and up until the last minute of preparations, it seemed the battle could have gone either way, with an extremely high belief from the Loyalist soldiers that they would win, at least on one front. Both battles of the campaign ended in a Loyalist defeat and caused most foreign nations back in the Loyalists to withdraw their support. After the campaign, only Ishkaria remained as their sole ally on Rathnir. The failed campaign destroyed nearly all faith in the Loyalist military leadership, and many Loyalists began to adopt a defeatist attitude towards the war. Following the intervention of the Eldaham Entente into the war, the Loyalists gained their only victory of the entire war at the city of Fornost, capital of Aurora, which coincidentally would be the last large-scale conflict fought in the war. With 72 Imperial deaths, damage done to the city, the Loyalists finally felt they had dealt a blow to Imperial Uldarash. The battle eventually resulted in the Treaty of Haktua, which essentially removed all the troops from the Eldaham Entente and support from the Loyalists, greatly weakening the already weak nation. The aftermath of the war, the Loyalist states were reintegrated and Nolia re-annexed. Ironically, the war to end the fake crown was what they needed to centralize power. However, the biggest after effect was that Aurorians were left unchallenged in their rule over the empire. Many of the states, including the Imperials, increasingly took issue with this. The Empire, especially Aurora, suffered due to large debt acquired when paying the Eldaham Entente to leave Rathnir in Haven, thanks to Robot Girly Man and Scotch Knight utilizing their extensive wealth to front the cost of the payment. However, Uldarash was able to continue its normal economic operations post-war. The end of the Civil War also brought about RP, building, and other projects, allowing citizens to breathe once more and enjoy the server. Burnout, however, plagued many parts of the Empire, especially in Aurora, who bore the brunt of the war for the Imperialists. Aurora began a slow decline from the end of the Civil War onwards, never again reaching the same level of population or military strength. The Loyalists generally fared worse than the rest of the Empire. None fared worse than Montroig. The entire Loyalist economy was poured into supplying their army, nearly all of which was lost through the heavy casualties throughout the course of the war, as well as by looting from their own soldiers. Montroig fared the worst from this, due to their larger role in the war effort and the main Uldarashi offensive of the war attacking and looting their capital. All plans by Montroig for developments such as large market in Tuatha were put on hold indefinitely. Montroy's population and activity began to spiral, and never reaching their pre-war peak. Elfhelm returned to prosperity far quicker than Montroy post-war, gaining a massive economy and beginning to mass-produce enchanted armor to sell to other nations. Elfhelm came out of the war way stronger than it had entered, gaining large numbers of skilled fighters who would play an important role in later wars on both Rathnir and Eldaham. Although tensions did exist prior to the outbreak of the Civil War, the populations of all states remained united in a common sense of being Uldarashi. The events of the war, however, resulted in radicalization of all involved, in particular the Loyalists, who began the war attempting to bring democracy to all of Uldarash, began to view their way of life as so separate from the other states, that the Loyalist goal gradually shifted from control of the empire to independence. Though fighting of the Civil War officially ended in January 2022, Loyalist resistance through politics continued left unchecked for the rest of the empire's history. At some point, Seven stepped down, and eventually Scott Knight became Empress. She was able to balance the power of the states and the Aurorians, but by the time of her reign, the writing was already on the wall. The empire will inevitably shatter, and it's just a matter of time. And what legacy will she leave behind? In late February 2022, important figures across Uldarash were made aware of an attempted coalition being formed against Aurora by Drak C5. An estimated 5 million was spent on equipping the army, and Drak claimed to have over 100 fighters ready in the coalition. I was actually one of the suppliers for him. While this number was certainly an exaggeration, the threat to Uldarash, and Aurora specifically, were still considerable. This was compounded by the shaky internal situation in Uldarash, as the grudges of the Uldarash Civil War were very much still present in the Empire. Given the chance, it was likely that the former states of loyalist Uldarash would rebel again. Uldarash once again began preparing for war, but it is at this point that the collapse would truly begin. Records of what exactly happened next are almost non-existent. Only accounts that exist come from the people involved. The facts of the situation are that on the 21st of February, Aurelian removed Ganifs as council member in Aurora. A meeting of the Aurorian Council quickly reinstated his position, but this was followed up by a meeting between Aurelian, Scotch Knight, and Robert Vorps. They demanded that Ganefs replace Canine as Uldarashi Emperor to resolve the oncoming crisis, as he was considered a more capable diplomat, facing both external pressure and internal threats of a coup. Aurelian reached a compromise as Ganefs was temporarily regent, set to reign in Aurelian's place for exactly 1 month. Things quieted down for a while as the threat of a coalition subsided, as the date at which Ganef's regency was supposed to end closed in. The former loyalist states began voting in favor of making Ganefs the official second emperor, deposing the Aurelio line and replacing it with the House of Ganef. Motion received 9 votes for and 6 against, but it required the approval of both emperors, which was not attained. The council then voted to extend Ganef's regency by another month, once again attaining a majority. By this point, however, the central government had lost all control. Ganefs openly began attacking the Aurorians, and several other Uldarashi states threatened succession. Any attempt to stop them would at this point certainly cause a coalition war. On the 22nd of March 2022, the Imperial High Council voted to dissolve the empire. No official announcement was made by the imperial government. Instead, each individual state announced its succession and bid farewell to the empire. Upon hearing the news of the empire's dissolution, cries of Emir Uldarash erupted from assembled crowds in every corner of the empire. By this point, the Aurorian hold on Haven had been weakened by many of the old guard quitting. The shattered empire pretty quickly became prey to foreign powers and internal conflicts. Chevriki, Elfhelm, and Montroy banded together to form the Union of Haven under Ganef's leadership, leading to the continent being split between 3 powers: the Kingdom of Aurora, the Hearthstone, Uldarash, and the Union of Haven. During my own revolution in Albir, the Union of Haven actually joined the coalition against me for no reason. And yes, I am still salty about it, and I am mad. Several Pan-Haven summits were held with mixed success. While they helped to repair Aurorian-Elfhelmian relationships, they made no progress in a more permanent diplomatic solution to the continent's woes. The collapse of Uldarash led to a power vacuum which contributed to instability in Chevriki, and allowed the horde to grow in Haven. While peace and eventually friendly ties would form between the Uldarashi successor states, Havenite blood would eventually be spilled in conflicts arising from horde claims over Sarvinia. But of course that will have to be a separate video. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it and would like to hear more about the Horde's history and what happened to the rest of the Haven continent, make sure to comment that down below and join my Discord. More Nation videos and history videos coming out soon. Got tons planned. Have a good day, guys.